Okay, recording has started. Um, Hello, anyone that ends up watching this. Um, so the only person here is Evan.
Yep.
So I'm recording this super late, and so he is in charge of all the questions. I suppose if anybody has questions, if you're watching this, you actually could leave a comment on the YouTube video.
Well, why do that? Just ask the question next time you show up. We can backtrack.
That's lame.
Yeah,
Leave a comment, like and
it's
subscribe.
more personal.
Click the notification
This isn't
bell.
this isn't public.
It's not. Um, but yeah. So it's chapter 23. Um, and it's a very short chapter, so this might not go on for too long. Um, and we're gonna spend an abnormal amount of time on the first sentence. So let's just start there. Uh, so here we go.
Chapter 24.
No,
No, that's too much.
here we go. Chapter 23.
Chapter
Oh.
23.
Huh. Well, Diego's joining. Did he join?
Ding dong.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Well, now there's two people that can potentially ask questions. I've already started the recording, Diego. But I almost started the first thing, so you clicked on just in time. Okay.
Cool.
Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah.
Okay. So Sarah lived 127 years. So as I said, I was gonna maybe do a little bit of backtracking to the last chapter. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about too much, which actually, no, we talked about it afterwards, but I don't think I mentioned it whenever people were here, is what was the actual age of Isaac at the time that the Binding of Isaac story happens? And technically we don't know. It just describes him as a boy. And so we don't really know. So you'll a lot of times you'll hear a lot people give like 13 something ish around there. Sometimes younger. But one of the things that I think is actually an interesting idea, and part of how I actually like the story a little bit, is I like thinking of Isaac actually as being a lot older and actually potentially even to into like his 30s. And part of how I get to that conclusion is I do a thing that I've warned people against doing and that you shouldn't do, which is, well, if you just read it straight chronologically, the next kind of date that you get is Rebecca's age, is Sarah's age when she dies, which is 127. And so Isaac is born whenever Sarah is 90. And so Sarah's death, Isaac is therefore 37. And so that kind of puts a maximum cap on the age. If you're reading these chronologically, which, as I've mentioned before, with a lot of the stuff, you may or may not, it's debatable whether or not you should be doing that, but you kind of have an age range there of where Isaac could be. And part of the reason why I like the idea of Isaac being older in this story is one, you have a closer typology to Christ because that's a similar age to whenever Christ is, makes that journey. And two, it makes the story, and this helps tying it closer to Christ, but it makes the story much more of a volunteer thing, right? Where Isaac isn't really being duped. Like Isaac gets what's going on. He's old enough to be smart enough to go what's going on. He's picking up what Abraham is laying down, basically, whenever he says his cryptic words. And because his father is really old, and if you go with, my headcanon here that I'm running with, Isaac could just beat the crap out of his dad. Right? If you really wanted to. Like, Isaac could stop what is occurring from occurring. He doesn't. He chooses to voluntarily go through it. And that kind of sentiment is the exact sentiment that we see with Christ in the Passion story, which is, if he wanted to get out of it, he could have gotten out of it. But he's voluntarily choosing to not do that. And I like that aspect of it. And so I like that wiggle room here. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know.
So, and I think that the time frame here can support that, because I feel like I thought I heard this someplace recently, and it might have been in a Matthew song, that there's like a belief that Sarah died during the binding of Isaac event. So that might be like a Jewish belief.
I don't know. Yeah.
Which would make him 37.
It would make him that.
37.
Yeah. I have heard that, but
I swear I heard it recently, because it might have been in that album.
Maybe he came out with a new album, which I actually haven't listened to yet. I know he's had a couple songs on there, but
yeah. But that was something that I thought I heard, and that's why I think I heard it. So that's like double maybes there. So maybe don't take any stock in that.
Sure.
But that's like an idea.
But you definitely have that. But you definitely have this story here, and this is a right. This is a we're kind of in the epilogue of Abraham's life. And we're transitioning into Isaac. And it is interesting to me that the binding of Isaac occurs, then this story of Sarah dying, and then next week we're going to get whenever Isaac actually gets married. So I guess I didn't mention that either. That was the other thing that I didn't mention last week, is that arguably, because Isaac isn't married yet in chapter 22, Isaac is arguably a virgin. And so it's also kind of this sacrifice of a virgin son. So you have that aspect of it too. So we'll keep going for a little bit.
I did something. Hold on before you.
Oh yeah, sure, go for it.
I did a curious Google Translate, which I know teachers always tell you not to, but for direct one-word translations, sometimes it tells you the different words you can use. And so for Hebrew, when you look up boy, it shows like, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 of the Hebrew different translations for boy. And so looking at the exact letters, just recognizing the shapes and whatnot, of the
Sure.
what is that Na'ar that it says in the Step Bible. That same one it says on Google Translate is boy, youth, lad, laddie, child, youngster. And there is another one a few below, a different translation, but it's a different word, one that uses servant. And I thought that was interesting because in the Step Bible, when you click the the word on verse 5 in Genesis 22, on verse 5 when it says boy, it uses servant in one of the 5 or 6 words that it supplies. And so I just thought that was
Right.
interesting that despite it being the word na'ar, it seems that nowadays at least Google doesn't think that servant applies to that word. But of course that could mean nothing, and I just thought that was an interesting find.
Yeah. And that's part of why I'm like hold that loosely because
Right, yeah.
because yes, it definitely does seem like the overwhelming consensus is that. But then you also have that funny thing that they're doing a lot in these stories of because of the elongation of the lifetimes, they're like
Right.
they're like relating them differently, right? Which is weird thing, and they it seems like they sometime where they proportionalize it to like how we live, right? And so Abraham, I think, is going to end up living to 180 years old or whatever.
Yes.
And so like, okay, well, if you live to 180, is 30 you're still a kid? It's like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah, exactly.
are we, and that's why earlier whenever it was like, oh, Sarah's still looking like a snack at 90 or whatever.
Right. And he has to hide his wife.
But right, it's like, how are we treating this or whatever?
I think it's fairly,
and they go back and forth on a lot of that
it's fairly
stuff.
understandable for an Abraham who's over 100 years old to call his son Isaac anything under 50 years old. He can still call him.
That's true.
Okay, so now we're just saying that Abraham's just throwing shade there.
Maybe.
Probably because Moses is going to end up living to 120. So maybe from Moses' perspective, as he's writing this down, Isaac is a kid, and so he calls him a boy.
Well, I mean, like, because people do this all the time. Like, you get to 70 or like even 60.
I got called a kid today by a dude that I'm pretty sure is only like 10 years older than me.
Like,
but I'm like, whatever.
It doesn't take a lot.
People and you think you're like 20, Kyle.
I know. Oh, well, yeah, I know. I think that's part of it.
Keep basking in that. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, and I was also just going to mention the, like, again, pure speculation whenever you get into like realm of symbology with like numbers, but 127 should probably be thought of as 120 and 7. And so like usually whenever you see those sort of things, you should split them up.
The number like 127, there's a ton of stuff that you can do with it.
Yeah, right, because you have the 120, which is you have, so 120 has like the 3 triads of 40, which is how Moses' life gets separated. But then you have like the addition of like the 7, so that's like an addition of like a little bit of like a God's blessing, like a little bit of like extra, like so she lived kind of like, so in like the Moses's life, it's like, okay, so she lived kind of like a perfect full life similar to Moses did, but a little bit more, right? So you have that, and then you're going to get that kind of like blown out of the water a little bit with Abraham, because like I said, I'm pretty sure Abraham does live to like 180 or something like that. But so just mentioning that, but I don't really have anything crazy to add on that. but I just wanted this next sentence before we talk about that a little
in the
bit.
land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Hebron. I figured that now would be a good time to do this since pretty much nobody's here and I can just share my screen. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly and to display to everybody that my knowledge of modern Israel's southern border is incorrect. Because I was thinking that it cut off right here. I forgot that it actually goes all the way down here.
Yeah, doesn't it touch the sea? Yeah.
Yeah, touch the Gulf of whatever that word
Aqaba.
is. Aqaba.
Yeah, you've clearly never seen Lawrence of Arabia.
I have seen Lawrence of Arabia, but it's been like a decade.
Oh, well, let's rewatch it.
I just remember that he goes crazy. But anyways, here you have Beersheba. And then here you have Jerusalem, and then right in between that is Hebron. And while we're here, I'll just go ahead and use this as here's Jericho. And here's the Jordan River. And then up here, that's Sea of Galilee. That's Nazareth. So get it, and there's Capernaum. So you just get a sense of the distances of. So this is part of the reason why Nazareth was thought of as kind of a backwater during Jesus's lifetime, because he's super far away from everything. Just not near anything, not near any, not like, and you have to remember, ancient cities and stuff were all based around bodies of water, right? So rivers and bodies of water and stuff. Nazareth is just, just right smack dab in the middle, near nothing. Like bodies of water and like hills and mountains and stuff. But I believe actually there is. Let's get crazy. Can I? How do I do the Google switch view thing?
Oh, you mean where you want to see the Google Earth?
Like Google Earth.
Yeah, just zoom in on a spot and click on it, and if it has the option, then you can it'll pop up.
Oh, well, no, I want to see terrain. Oh, that's what I want to do. Terrain.
Oh, you want to see satellite? Okay.
Yeah, satellite images.
Gotcha.
It's not working. Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff about, okay, yes, that's basically right. Yeah, there's supposed to be a bunch of mountain ranges in like the north. Like right around here. Yeah. And like, right here. Yeah, some mountain ranges and stuff. I guess I can't tell. I'm trying to tell steepness by level of shadows. Let me see.
How's your topography?
Mount Hermon. Where's Mount Hermon at? Okay.
How does northern Israel?
Okay, that's where I thought it was. It's like all the way. So no, Mount Hermon is a completely different thing. Yeah. So I don't have time to get into talk about Mount Hermon, but there's a bunch of like Dr. Hyde stuff about how Mount Hermon is like, yeah, you can actually tell even from this that that's a big mountain range. But I believe you're supposed to be able to see Mount Hermon from Nazareth. And part of the thing is that you remember the story of the Samaritan and the Samaritan woman by the well? She's discussing like which mountain they're supposed to be like sacrificing on.
Yeah.
One of the so I believe that the mountain that the Samaritans mostly sacrificed on was Mount Hermon. And because of that, in Second Temple Jewish thought, Mount Hermon becomes associated with like the strongholds of like evil supernatural powers, so basically Satan and demons and stuff. And so part of the thought process is to like why Jesus is born in Nazareth is that it's like a he's going to do battle with Hermon. It's kind of it's complicated. Heiser talks about it like a bunch in his works. We don't need to get distracted about that now because also I don't know how to explain it well. So I'll just allude to that there. So yeah, so basically I was just trying to show Hebron as being kind of in the middle of those locations where Abraham is doing the bulk of his sojourning, which matters because of this big conversation that we're going into right now. So I think I'm just going to play the whole thing. I think I'm going to play the whole thing, and then we'll just put it all together.
And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my lord, you are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. And he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, of all who went in at the gate of his city, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, But if you will, hear me. I give the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites, before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it, made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites.
Okay. So I wanted to play that whole thing because it is all kind of basically one thought and just an extended conversation. So the Hebrew there actually says the sons of Heth. It doesn't say the Hittites, it says the sons of Heth, but that's where you go back to your table of nations and all that stuff. And it talks about the sons of Heth. Sons of Heth are the progenitors, or Heth is the progenitor of the Hittites, and so that's why, like, ESV just translates it Hittites.
So that's kind of like an anachronism based off of the translation, then.
Yes. Yeah, not a thing at the time of the translation in English they're doing. And we've had this issue at other points, right, where it says like, I forget what it was, like Mizrapah or whatever, but the English was just like Egypt, because that ends up being the same word that's used for Egypt later. So part of the interesting thing so there's a lot of interesting things that are going on in this conversation, but obviously it's really long, and it seems like it shouldn't, like, if this is your first brush with like the Bible, this seems like a very strange story that comes out of nowhere.
Well, it sounds like a story that in most other cases in the Bible, it's one sentence and we move on.
Right, exactly. And you're just like, oh, he bought a cave and buried Sarah there, and boom, we're done. Like, why are we going through all of the rigmarole of explaining their conversation here? And as I mentioned, we had kind of a similar thing that happened with Abimelech a couple chapters ago with the well at Beersheba, and then you're gonna get this again in the future with other people. When David ends up buying the land for establishing the temple or establishing the Temple Mount, he goes through the same process where, like, he's like doing a little negotiation thing and all of this stuff. So this tells us, so the questions that we should be asking about this section is, why is this in there? And so, okay, so I want to argue for it's in there for a couple of reasons. One, it's in there for very practical reasons, and those practical reasons being, it's displaying one is that I think it's displaying the process of it's actually kind of displaying the process of trade in the ancient world, but that's not like the goal of it. But the practical reason is the same practical reason that I said with the last one, which is that the descendants of Abraham are like they're showcasing their deeds, they're showcasing their claims and their ties to the land, and they're demonstrating that they kind of have a right to certain aspects of the land, which is a big, and it should be remembered that a big deal for Abraham, precisely for the reason of he is a sojourner in the land. Like, it's not just a coincidence that line is in there. He needs to purchase the land because he is a sojourner. He doesn't own the land yet. He doesn't possess the land, but he's trying to go through a legitimate process to acquire it, and so he's having to go through this rigmarole, and they're documenting the rigmarole of the conversation so that they can display that it's valid. You have a valid claim to the space.
Well, he
right?
follows up that same kind of concept early on in the conversation in verse 9, in the second sentence of it, where it says, "For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a bond."
Right.
So it's following up with the same concept that the previous the covenant and everything had, but had to be public. Where
Yes.
big important transactions are really wholesome, being binding.
That
also,
yes, the public awareness of the deals are the validation of the deals. Right. Much like how modern states are declared. You're only a valid state if other states actually agree that you are a state, which is why Russia is fighting in Ukraine right now because they're like, hey, we're going to force you guys to see these things as independent states. I also think that it's interesting to think of this conversation in a way of just asking the question, where is this taking place? Because it just goes, Abraham rose up before his dead and then said to the Hittites. Are the Hittites there? It's very unclear as to where this conversation is happening. And you don't get until verse
verse 10 says that Ephraim was sitting among the Hittites, meaning there was a council or something going on.
Yep, and all who that's where it says and all
hearing
who went into the gate of his city. And again, that his there is not clear as to who it's referring to, but if we're applying those rules that we had beforehand, the previous proper noun, if you read it in English, is Abraham. But if you're reading Hittites as the sons of Heth, Heth is the previous one. And so I'm pretty sure that it's the Hittite city.
Oh, so it would be like Heth's.
It would be Heth's city, right. Wherever that's at. Where exactly that's at, I'm not totally sure, but it's probably around Hebron some way. Now, that's a little bit weird to me and always confuses me because maybe I need to do this again. But if you look up where Hittites if I just Google Hittites map, they pretty much always put Hittites. So let's share the screen again. Present Hittites. Can you see this, Diego?
Yeah.
Wait, I know it's working. Okay. Yeah. So the Hittites basically live in Turkey, for the most part. And they do dip down here into that into northern Israel, Lebanon, Syria region. But they're usually not as attributed as being as far south as Hebron is. So it's one of the things about the story that I've always been I have trouble mapping on where exactly this stuff is at, but also remember that we're dealing with different times and borders were pretty fluid back then, and people moved around. So Where exactly that's at, I don't know, but obviously the Hittites had at least a city, and there's also a kind of a lot of ideas of even if like you look at the map, we have a tendency to be like, oh, the Hittites controlled all of this, and it's like all of the area that's red or whatever. But
Yeah.
that's not the way it all worked in the ancient world.
Yeah.
Usually it was more like something closer to this, or not even this, where it would be like just individual cities, right? You could have individual cities even like within like the same kind of area, but like the people groups that are in those cities would be different. Um and it's part of the reason why whenever you get to the stories of like Exodus and they're going all around, they're all going around this area down here and they're wandering, but they're running into all kinds of different people groups.
Right.
The reason why they're running into all kinds of different people groups is because each of those people groups have like a different city. And it's not like that they have necessarily clearly defined areas because people didn't actually have borders back then.
Right.
You just had a city. And so it was more like Greek city states and stuff like that, where you just kind of had these pockets of civilizations.
Because how would you define and maintain a border?
Because people didn't define and maintain borders. It was too difficult back then. And so people would constantly, and that's part of the reason why people would constantly have border disputes, because you define the border whenever you decided to get enough guys together to go out and ride and say, you guys are on our land, we're going to kick you like a couple days ride journey back further, and now this is our border. But they didn't like maintain that really a lot of times, and it was always difficult to do things like that. And so I think it's even if the Hittites and the Hittite kingdoms were predominantly in the northern regions, it's very reasonable that they could have a Hittite city or a Hittite village that was outside of those regions. I mean, even like most of the Greek cities that are in Turkey are all like colony cities of city states from mainland Greece.
Right.
But after a while, they break off and become their own thing. Carthage is a colony city of the Phoenicians, who are from Syrian, or who are from Sidon and Tyre, in like that same like Lebanon, Damascus region. But they broke off, they moved, settled the city there and became their own thing. So I'm just saying all that to say that's what's going on. The Hittites have a city that's down there, but it's probably just that city. It's probably not like that they control the entire region.
And but anyway, to get back on what we were saying, you were talking about there are multiple ways to interpret why this is here, and the first one was
practical. Yeah. So the other is more theological.
Right.
And we'll end up going back and talking about practical as we get more into the discussion of the what they're actually saying and the back and forth and everything. But kind of the theological notion about what's going on here. So again, I'm going to read from this commentary that I love to rag on. So I'm just going to read this part from this guy's commentary. This is a commentary on the part where he says, "I am a foreigner and sojourner among you." Abraham did not feel this way because he came from Ur of the Chaldeans. It was because he recognized his real home was in heaven. Moses knew the same and commanded Israel to know it. David also knew the truth. And then he gives Bible verses to all these other things. That is stupid.
Yeah, that sounds dumb.
Yeah, it's very, very dumb. Okay. Like the reason why Abraham says I'm a foreigner and a sojourner among you is because he is a foreigner and a sojourner among them, right? And this theological and what the commentator, and this is why I'm tying it to the theological point. The commentator is trying to make a theological point. But what he's doing is he's mapping that theological point onto Abraham's thinking himself, which is the wrong way to go about doing this. We'll talk about how I think you should do it. But Abraham is saying that because that is what he is. His next point in the commentary is a commentary on give me property for a burial place among you. Abraham had a particular property in mind that came of Machpelah. This property was in the land of Ephraim of Zohar. In his travels around Canaan, Abraham had earlier lived in this area and had built an altar to God here. He knew this cave and was willing to pay the full price for it. And then he moves on. If Abraham knew that his real home was in heaven, why did he care about this particular plot of land? Okay. As soon as you try to apply this like theological lens and apply it to Abraham's thinking, you actually screw up your theological point. Okay. So this is why I'm ragging on this guy's thing. Okay. Here's the proper way to map this theological point on, because we are sojourners. So the way that we think of it is, yes, we are sojourners in this life, and our real home is heaven. But this is where you got to have a good, proper eschatology of what is heaven. Heaven is not a different realm that is separate from this life. Heaven is on earth, right? And so what you are doing and what Abraham is doing is in the land of his sojournings, in the land where he doesn't really belong, he is grounding himself, right? Like literally, he's staking the ground, like he's grounding himself. He is applying himself to this life. Okay. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, which is actually I watched a video today, which is actually a video that I'm probably going to send you, Diego, because it's Jordan Peterson talking to Jimmy Carr, which is really interesting. But Jimmy Carr makes a point in the video, which is a very common point that you'll hear from people all the time, which is they come to the conclusion that they no longer want to believe in an afterlife because they think that believing in an afterlife means that they can't appreciate this life. And a proper theological understanding of this story is that, yes, your real home is with God, which is what heaven is. And you are a sojourner in the land. You are a sojourner in this life. You don't fully belong here. But what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to tie yourself to the land. You are supposed to stake claims and claim the land and the territory for God, for Christ. You are supposed to not, and so in the same way where I say, and I've made this point before about you are supposed to think about heaven, you are supposed to think about heaven, but at the same time, in that context of thinking about heaven, you are supposed to be doing things on earth. You're doing both of those things at the same time. And what you're doing is you are applying heaven to the land. And that is part of the reason why the Old Testament does so much talking about the freaking land. And that's one of the things that I think modern American evangelical church loses, is we lose the conversation about the land and understanding what the land is. The land is the here and now, and it's where we live, and it's where the people who come after us will live and will be. And we are supposed to be subduing the land. And so we are supposed to be we are supposed to, so I'm going to put this in air quotes, which nobody can see because none of you are here except for Evan. We are supposed to be, cricket showed up. We are supposed to be like taking territory. And we are taking territory like for Christ. And that taking territory should be thought of also as like it's winning souls, it's winning people, right? And winning people in such a way that you are winning communities and winning nations over for Christ, which is precisely what Paul is doing. And it's what the Great Commission says, right? Go to all peoples and nations and baptizing them and making disciples, right? Like that is what we're supposed to be doing. And that's what I'm saying. That's the theological point that's being made in this goofy story, is that point. If you're going to go through and try and find all of the references to land in that book, it's like there's like 200 of them.
Not land, but I know there's an illustration of what I'm thinking of in this book. In the Language of Creation, the Matthew Pageau book, there's a description, and this is like a concept that's in the Bible, because there's verses about the relation between wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
Yes.
And that has a diagram in this book. But the point of that is that there is wisdom comes from God, from heaven.
Yes.
Understanding is essentially like the application of that wisdom, and what you gain through that process is experiential knowledge. Once you have experiential knowledge, you're now in a position where you can spread the wisdom to others. And that framework is very similar to the idea of thinking about heaven, doing stuff in the world. But when you do that, you're gaining experiential knowledge, which allows you to pass that on to other people.
Yes.
But it's that same and like in the diagram here in this book, it shows that like what that does, once you gain experiential knowledge through applied wisdom from God, it forms you into a like mini replica of God.
Yes.
Which is the standpoint from which you can then pass on wisdom to people.
Exactly, which is what we're trying to be in Christians, little Christ, right? That is what we are attempting to be. And so like so basically the argument that I'm making is, even in this goofy little story about buying plots of land, you have in microcosm the same story of what modern day Christians are supposed to be doing. And it is wrong to say that Abraham is like thinking of it in those theological terms. Maybe he is, but if he is, what he's doing, it is a way of bringing heaven to earth and having heaven meet earth, which is the same thing as the restoration of Eden, right? Which is what we're trying to do. And so, and how I talked about the long arc of God's plan throughout the whole Bible is presence, fellowship, right? Is heaven meets earth, is Eden that gets lost, and Abraham is the beginning of this long plan of redemption to bring that back all together to where Christ is going to redeem everything. And so even this stupid little story about him buying a plot of land is like, it's not the first, because we've had other little spots beforehand where he, right, because he does this with the well, he does other little things like this, but it's another stake in the ground, a claiming territory of making that plan come to fruition.
Do you have any other ways of interpreting it? Because I was thinking of, there's a couple of different ways if I can think about why potentially this story is in the Bible. I can think of like two.
Well, those were the main two that I had.
Yeah, well, this is just what I was thinking about it. The first one, which is like a general kind of thought of like, okay, when you don't know why something's in the Bible, especially like in the Old Testament, maybe it relates to Jesus. There's a good chance of that. I think I count like three. One, someone's dead. Two, a burial in a cave tomb. And three, an exchange of silver. Was just what I caught there. And I'm going to assume that there could be something else here.
Usually my thing is like, I always put it in context of like the context of like trying to figure out why its story is in the Bible is so the part of the different ways that I think we should think about it is, how did the original readers think about it? How did it get theologically interpreted in like Second Temple Judaism? And reason why it's specifically Second Temple Judaism is because that's how people would have thought about it at the time of Christ. Right. So when Christ is talking about it and making references to things, which we might not have an explicit reference to this, but Christ probably taught more than what we're aware of, and people would have been discussing these stories and stuff at the time. So how did those people think about it? And then how did Christians later think about it? And so that's your connection to but the practical one is what I'm trying to say is the people at the time probably would have thought about it.
Well, the other option from practical is, I think, almost instructional in one specific case, and it's that how do you handle situations because like one question I get when reading this is, why are the Hittites being so nice or nice?
Yes.
Because what I think it is when they first say something, is what they say is, "Hear us, my Lord, you are Prince of God," or it can be translated as Mighty Prince. And then it says, "Oh, you're a really cool guy. Of course, you can take anything you want here."
Yes.
Well, why does someone in that position do that? It's so that they can have something on you.
It's exactly
so
right.
You can control them later. Why does Abraham insist that he does pay now, so that it is paid for and the situation is done?
Correct.
Not have something else held on it. And I think that's the instructional lesson to be taken from this.
Which is the same lesson as the story from Melchizedek of whenever the king of Sodom is like, take all this stuff, and he's like, no, just taking like what's owed, and that like I'm just taking this stuff. I'm not going to take all this other stuff because you're not going to get credit for this. Mm-hmm. And so it's the don't. And so it's actually very similar to the don't swear things, right? It's don't swear on things. Don't let there be favors and things owed to you or that you owe others. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. That same idea is definitely in here. But yes, is what I was going to talk about whenever we get into the actual conversation of what's going on here is a play. It's a form of negotiation and haggling it did in the ancient world, and actually kind of did for a really long time, and still really done in the Middle East for a really long time. And part of it would actually be common for you can actually see this if you watch like American Pickers or something like that. So like if you watch American Pickers, they always talk about like the first thing that they buy or whatever. They'll like overpay for it, right? And part of what they're doing there is they're like ingratiating, and they always refer to it as greasing the wheels, right? They're like ingratiating themselves like with the person, gaining their trust or whatever, and makes it easier to do like things in the future. So both of them, right? And remember, I talked about how Abraham is. This is probably isn't Abraham's first rodeo on doing negotiations, right? He's probably a trade prince. He's probably an economic, right? And also, why you can read Prince of God. Okay, so why can you read Prince of God and Mighty Prince as either translation? Like, okay, the reason why you can read it as, okay, so where's that at? Actual verse.
That's verse 6.
Yeah. Verse, yeah. Prince of God. Okay. So the Prince of Elohim. Right. What does El mean? Just means power. So if you're a prince of power, right, it's like the same kind of like idea. Just means power, and so it can get used in either description. And so this isn't his first time that he's done this, and so he's used to this, and so it's both. They're both using forms of flattery, and they both are doing things actually that is to the other's benefit. So, like for one thing, I believe. So where did it go? And Abraham in the hearing says, "But if you will accept me, I give the price of the field. Accept it from me, and I may bury my dead there." Ephraim answered. So Abraham doesn't actually ask him, what is the price of the field? He's just saying, I'm gonna pay the full price. He doesn't actually ask what the full price is. And then Ephraim goes, what is the land worth 400 shekels like between us, right? And so he's being coy. And it's Abraham didn't ask, but he's answering anyways because he's setting that full price. And so he's Abraham kind of actually, so one of the things that everybody talks about is in negotiations, right? The first person to say a price loses, right? Like that, generally speaking.
Well, it's gonna be you're gonna stick yourself there. So
you're sticking yourself there
because key negotiation tactic is that once you have that spot, what you're going to try and do is get that person to then state a lower price again.
Right.
Because it will be, once you state your response price, that's you're locked in there, and you're going to meet somewhere in the middle.
Correct.
But if you can get them to lower their price or raise their price in either direction, before you have a first response. So if your first response to hearing a price is to laugh it off, and then they change, that is a very strong position for you to be in.
Right. And so because what's his face? Ephron comes in with the I'm offering it to you for free, which is of course BS. He's not offering it to him for free, but he's displaying corporately his humbleness. And if Abram were to accept it for free at that point, he wouldn't very well liked it in the land, and people would be like, "Oh, he stole that from him," right? Like he's a bad person.
And likely would have had some obligations, and so, in which he's not always around, so they could have done anything to it.
Exactly. And so Abraham comes back with a kind of right. So Ephraim does the I'll do the best possible offer. Abram comes back for you. Abram comes back with, I'll do the best possible offer, but they're both unnamed, right? But also, we give the best possible offers, but we're also kind of screwing the other over in the same token when we do that, right? Because there's a way that that Ephron screws Abraham over if he actually agrees, but also Abram doesn't give a price. And so because Abram doesn't give a price, he's also screwing Ephraim over because he now has to name a price, right? So we're both kind of pretending that we're doing the best possible thing. We're both kind of slightly screwing each other over. So Ephraim very shrewdly comes back with, I'm still pretending like I'm offering you the best possible thing, but I'm also naming a price now. The thing that Abraham does here, which I think is right in that I think that the thing that displays to me in this story, the thing that displays to me that Abraham is taking this seriously and solemnly because it's in relationship to the burial of his wife. The thing that shows me that he's taking it seriously is that he doesn't renegotiate.
Right.
He takes the price.
And also in the position of that conversation, it would be nearly impossible to reply with a lower price point.
It would.
You're not actually setting a lower price point because the price point at current is technically free. You can't offer a lower price point because you just say, just take it.
And so because of that, it also makes it so that first thing that he did is a little bit of a trap, right? Because of I already offered it to you for free. If you try to lower me, it's like, you're kind of a jerk, right? And so it's a double-edged sword of you're a jerk thing. But Abram does the thing and just move in there. And so and this is where I also think that a bit of the part of this story is to display a little bit of the wisdom of Abraham, right? Because a lot of the stories previously are Abraham does some kind of stupid, unwise things,
right? But
in the epilogue, the last quarter or the last third of Abraham's life, right? In the epilogue of Abraham's life, he has more wisdom now. He knows not to try and fight on this point. He's just taking it for what it is and honoring Sarah, honoring the Hittite, and so in this way, he's honoring the people of the land, honoring his wife, and honoring God, and doing what God wants. He's doing all of these different things correctly, all at the same time,
right?
Which is the thing that you hopefully are doing as you start to get towards the end of your life, you're able to, with a single action, do multiple things right all at the same time. And you're not fumbling around so much like you are when you're younger. But yeah, that was mostly all I had there. There are some comparisons that can be made to like the price with some of the other prices that appear throughout, like I said, there's a similar story about when David buys the plot of land for where the temple goes. He ends up paying like, I think it's like 800 like something of gold or something like that. So it's like an amping
Okay.
up of like this same like
While we're
price
on this
thing.
point, I thought about thinking about this. That is this the first? Let's start talking. Is this the first instance of shekels? Because I feel like it is. I don't remember them saying shekels before.
I don't know. Probably.
And so I find it kind of funny that the first instance of shekels is stated by a Hittite.
I think the next instance of shekels is going to end up coming up with Joseph.
Right.
And I think those are like the main ones.
Because it's funny that it's first said by a Hittite in the Hittite is receiving shekels, because that's usually used as like an anti-Semitic term. When it's like, oh, this might just be a like trans Canaan like
currency. Yeah. Oh well, and it's also probably like, again, you also have to remember anachronistic tendencies.
Right.
It's probably it's Moses writing down that, or the authors, whoever's writing down, they're writing down using the currency that they know. Was that the currency that the Hittites and Abraham actually used? Who knows? Right. Perhaps not. But they're using it in that context because that's what they're familiar with.
But I'm saying it'd be fun.
It's like whenever we say that, like, oh, we bought the Louisiana Purchase for so many dollars, even though like American greenback, like I don't even think was a thing at the time. Like, I think like
money.
Well, it might have been paper money, but for the Louisiana Purchase, but it just wouldn't have been like the standard American greenback, or like it definitely wasn't from like the Federal Reserve dollar. The Federal Reserve became a thing in like the early 1900s.
Well, no, I think actually
after that,
because I thought they started because Jefferson's only.
I don't actually know.
Second president. I'm pretty sure they didn't start using paper money for a while.
Maybe.
Diego, do you know this?
I zoned out. I was reading. I was glancing at chapters. What do I know?
When did the U.S. start using paper money?
Oh boy. I think it would have been after the Louisiana Purchase. But I'm not sure.
Because the Louisiana Purchase.
That's my gut.
Yeah.
Because that's within. Did Jefferson have 2 terms?
Yeah.
Eyeball, it's within 16 years.
Either way, it doesn't matter. My point still stands. It's the equivalent of saying like that kind of a statement.
Right.
And just being like, okay, we're not gonna like futz about too much about and argue about whether or not that's accurate.
Yeah. Well, that point aside, I think anyone using shekels to go after someone that is Jewish would not. They don't know that.
Yeah, no, they don't know that. Yeah.
Since their knowledge would just be, oh, this is like a Jewish. It's funny that the first instance we have of that in the Bible is from someone that's not Jewish.
Yeah.
I was looking ahead and I see the next chapter is 67 verses.
Or actually no, Hittites are
Heth.
Heth. I think that's gonna be Japheth actually.
Yeah.
Because all like the most northern peoples are Japheth.
So yeah, so not.
So not Shemites.
So
So a non-Semitic.
yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Wait,
Count
I
it.
think that's all I found in there. No.
You got anything, Diego?
No.
Wanted to
I'm
add?
wondering if next chapter is going to be broken up.
Oh, yeah. Next chapter
Rather
is super
large.
long. Yeah, next chapter is 60. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. But next chapter is we get to see possibly Eliphaz or whatever his name is again. So yeah,
Yeah.
the Alfred of the Bible.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Butler.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for joining, Diego. Thank you for your contributions.
No problem.
Let's stop the recording now.